I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Natural Resources Board, regular meeting, Tuesday, October 6, 2020. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Barbara, can we have roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Ware.
Present.
Mr. Stadelman.
Present.
Mr. Powers.
Present.
Mr. Carano.
Present.
Ms. Callahan.
Present.
Ms. Mosblick.
Present.
Mr. Carrier.
Present.
And Ms. Lovell.
Present.
Thank you.
Glad to see everyone's here. We need a motion for the approval of minutes on two different times. The first motion would be for August 4th, 2020. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes for August 4th, 2020?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Thomas, motion first. Donna, motion second. Is there any questions or anything? Anybody wants to say anything on that? If we can vote for that, I vote aye.
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 Thank you, everybody on Zoom as well. Then can we get a motion to approve the minutes for September 1st, 2020?
I make a motion to approve the September 1st, 2020 minute meetings.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Donna Ware, second. Thomas, motion first. Is there any questions on that? Can we vote to approve the minutes for September 1st? I vote aye.
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 Unanimous ayes. We'll move on to item 5, announcements. It looks like there's an open position on the board.
Nope, might have noticed that we're completely full tonight. With our newest member, Jeffrey Carrier, we are all maxed out at 9
Wow.
tonight.
That's really showing that the community is really involved in what we're doing here as far as Natural Resource Board and everything that's going on. It's been a really, really exciting, one way of putting it, year with everything that's happened. But it's great to see everybody participating, getting involved. If anybody's listening, you can come down to the clerk's office and ask to do any volunteer position in the city may have, as well as regular job openings are also posted on the bulletin board in the clerk's office. And we would be glad to see you here. Item B, a day in the life water quality event on October 24th. That's an actionable item?
That is an event we do every year, and I know different members of the Board of Health every year. We have a group of school kids with us. This year it's going to be on a Saturday, and we're going to have a Boy Scout troop with us. And it goes really quick. So we start at like 8 and it's done way before noon. It's a really well-organized water quality sampling. So it's called Snapshot Day. So they'll be doing the same water quality data collection at like 100 different spots all up and down the coastline of the lagoon. So it makes a neat picture of water quality. And I just need a couple volunteers to come out on October 24th with me. And we'll meet at Fisherman's Landing at about 8 a.m. usually.
Is that where you're going to be the whole time, or are you spreading out?
That's it. We just go, one group of people will be doing analysis under the cover, and the other group will be getting some data in the water. But the kids do most of the stuff. We just hold the instructions. It's really well organized.
I'll volunteer.
Right.
Donna's is our first volunteer. Is anybody else ready to volunteer for
Yeah,
October
I can be there.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
thank you very much for your participation, both of you. You said actionable item. Do we have to vote on anything?
Is that Ruth?
Yes, hi. I loved participating last year for the time that I could, and I would love to help with the analysis part. That was fun.
That was really
So I
cool.
volunteer.
Thank you, Ruth.
Would anybody else like to
Kim,
volunteer
this
as
is
well
Jessica
or
Lovell.
chime in?
This is Jessica Lovell. You can sign me up, Kim.
Okay, great. That is perfect. Then we have 2 for each station, and we're great. The next item is the Keeping Her Beautiful Coastal Cleanup Day is on October 17th. I did not get the details from Daisy in time to give them to you tonight, but I will make sure I email them out to you if you want to participate, so I'll let you know that's coming.
Is that the same one where we went down to the Main Street boat ramp and we all met there and was picking up stuff along the lagoon?
That's a different one.
Okay,
That's a coastal.
all right.
There's a number of cleanups.
I am still amazed at how much garbage is in the lagoon. I mean, we do 5 or 6 of these a year, and you could go out there and pick up a big black construction bag of garbage. I'm just amazed. I don't know.
And the next item is the November 3rd meeting. What we want to discuss is that the first Tuesday of November is November 3rd, which is Election Day. It's a presidential election day. I think that it would be a good idea to cancel that meeting. And we'll reconvene in December, and then we'll have the Sustainable Sebastian Action Plan and a spreadsheet, and we'll be ready to go move forward. It's just my recommendation, but you'll need to vote on that.
Okay, let me go back to item B. It says actionable item. Do we have to vote or anything on that?
That was
That's just
People
to
to
get the
volunteer.
volunteers? Okay. Can I get board response for the request to cancel November 3rd meeting?
Okay,
It's election day.
are we considering this just basically because people will be going to elections? I mean, is this building used for elections?
No, it isn't. It's used for early elections.
Right.
So we do have people coming constantly into the door, and then we have to tell them not to. So it's really disturbed evening, but then also I wouldn't want to interfere with anyone else needing to vote when they get out of work, or just throwing it out there, because it is a presidential election.
It just seems to miss a whole month. is
And
a lot.
apology.
But that's why you get to vote.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is Jessica. Can we just reschedule for a different day and not skip the whole entire month?
The schedule's really tight because of the early voting. That council and other meetings didn't meet won't be meeting the last 2 weeks of October. So all their meetings got pushed over. So the room is pretty booked. I can check into it, but it was pretty booked, considering that December's a hot,
My view on it, I don't mind coming. For me personally, if it's inconvenient for staff or anything like that, I like to hear from staff. For me personally, I wouldn't mind coming because there's so much that needs to get done by the end of the year, and that's just my personal view on it. I mean, we're obviously going to take a vote on it, I think, to cancel it, or
it's for you to decide. Just throwing it out there.
that's just my personal
Well, maybe
opinion.
you should just ask who would come first.
Does anybody else want to make some comment on that before we proceed?
Well, Kim, are the offices open here at City Hall?
Are the what?
Is that a normal workday at City Hall?
Yeah.
Well,
Like
I
some-
would come.
Who would come?
I can be here.
1, 2, I would come, 3, 4,
Just
5.
take a vote
I
to
think we
yay or
would-
nay to cancel, and then we can.
I think we would have a full, I think we all want to be here, actually.
So just take a
So-
vote, and then
Why don't you make
All
a
right, that's
motion?
good. We have an actionable item for dismissing November 3rd meeting. If I ask it for dismissal, let's hold the December 3rd meeting. For holding the December 3rd meeting
November
as
3rd.
scheduled.
November 3rd.
I'm sorry, November 3rd meeting as scheduled. A motion is for holding the November 3rd meeting as scheduled. I need a motion to do that.
I make a motion to hold the November 3rd meeting as scheduled.
Can I have a second to hold the November 3rd meeting as scheduled?
I'll second that.
Donna seconds, and Thomas first, the motion. Is there any questions or comments on that motion? Okay, let's take a vote, voice vote. I vote aye.
Is it okay with you, Kim?
Yeah.
Going to be for that meeting?
Yeah, it was just suggested that we should have a vote on it in case, I didn't want to impede anyone's voting, so that was why.
Great, thank you. We greatly appreciate that consideration. We'll take a voice vote. An aye is to hold the November 3rd meeting as scheduled. I vote aye.
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 Are there any nays?
Aye.
It passes unanimously with ayes, so we'll have our meeting on November 3rd. And it looks like that's it for announcements. And we will move on to item 6, public input. Is there anybody on Zoom who would like public input?
No one has raised their hands at this time.
Thank you. We'll move, that's about it. We will move on to item 7, new business. Item A, integrated pest management. Yay.
So we're starting the Parks and Properties IPM plan will be presented to City Council on October 14th. That's the next Wednesday's meeting. And the Stormwater IPM plan, we're looking to get that underway. Since we have some new members on our board, I wanted to ask again, we need at least 3 volunteers from the Natural Resources Board to serve on this committee. We haven't decided the regular meeting dates. We'll decide it at the first meeting. But it usually meets 3 o'clock on a Monday or Tuesday, and depending on who signs up, we'll kind of work out what day will be best.
Once a month?
It's going to be every other week this time.
Twice.
Instead of every week, it's going to be.
I would like to serve on that committee. As one, if we need 3.
Kim, I think I volunteered once before.
Yep.
I still want to be on.
And then,
And
anybody on Zoom?
hi, this is Ruth. I can serve as a resource committee member, or I think I had a double serving, but I volunteer for whatever capacity you want.
Thank you.
We will still need one more to actually sit on the board. Because Ruth is going to serve as a resource capacity.
So that if her work brings her out of
Ruth,
town.
will you be able to attend the regular meetings as well, or are you going to let us use your knowledge when we call, or do you want to attend the meetings?
I will attend the meetings.
Okay.
So when we started for the pest management plan, I had gone to overseas, so that's why I wasn't in person the first time.
Great. Then
Well,
we're
we're
good.
glad that you're back, Ruth, and you're safe.
And any other members interested in the stormwater IPM process, we get to go. You're always welcome to any of the meetings. I always let you know when all the meetings are. And whenever we have a new draft version, you'll see it.
And then you'll just update us for
Yeah, this
meeting. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is Jessica. I would like to show interest as well for the board. So if we have another opening, or if you just kind of fill in as I did with the integrated pest management plan, I'm definitely happy to help as well.
Great. We're good?
Thank you, Ms. Lovell. Does anybody have any additional comment on stormwater IPM plan action item is, do we, just for volunteers, there's nothing to vote on, right?
I have one question for Kim. So for the presentation of the plan to City Council, I am available to be there in support of that in any capacity that you would like for me to participate.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Do you want all of us there for that?
As soon as the agenda goes out, I'll send it to everyone, and you can participate in any way you'd like. If you want to stand up during public input and say something in support of it, whatever you'd like. You have signed, we've signed, you've already passed and agreed to it, approved it, but we appreciate all the support we can get.
Sometimes there's a problem with us going in front of the board as other board members. But so we're able to come up with when that IPM plan's presented as a Natural Resource Board member at the city council meeting.
You just give your support for the plan.
Okay. You guys all know what I'm referring to, right? Okay,
Yeah.
I see
We all
everybody's
know.
shaking up and down. Good. Okay, excellent. Any other comments from anybody on the new business, any new business item? And I guess there's one more thing we didn't talk about. The item A we went through. Let's do item B, the final draft for the conservation and coastal management element of the city's comprehensive plan per request. And we're just going to go through what we need to go through. If anybody's got any questions.
What we recommend is just ask each member if they have notes on it. You know, we don't need to read the whole thing. It is available for anyone watching that isn't familiar with the plan. They can go to the city's homepage. It's right at the bottom, and you can see the most current drafts if you want to follow along with us. And so I recommend just hitting each member if they have any notes, and then going from there.
Okay. All right, so we are talking about this as a final draft of the conservation and coastal management element of the city's comprehensive plan. And we'll start at the far end, way down there, with Mr. Patrick. We can also take a minute to look through it as well, if we'd like to just take a minute, take a breath and see what you want to comment on. And as well as anybody online, on Zoom, our other board members, Nikki, Jessica, Ruth, and I don't know if Barbara over here gets to comment. No? No comment. Ms. Frazier gets to comment sometimes, but she's over there now.
I'm only here to answer your questions, sir.
I had time to look it over, and it's impressive. It really is. And it's even more encouraging as a resident to know that we're going to be doing things like this. So I wholeheartedly support it. It's excellent.
Great.
I have one question.
Sure.
As far as the conversion from septic to sewer, I would like to be able to say in 10 years, we start expanding that out of just the coastal area into more populated areas. Is there any plan whatsoever in this new plan that addresses that?
And that's a great question. And our Planning and Zoning Commission were also very adamant about that. We have added in the infrastructure section such language as in the city will look at ways of expanding our ability. Now, please try to understand that utilities is owned by the county, and it is very expensive, and it would take a lot of effort in order to get everybody, let's say, in the Highlands.
Yeah.
It's already a developed area. It's an existing neighborhood. It'd be very expensive. It's not that it couldn't be done. It'll just be very expensive. But in the infrastructure element, there is language saying, based on the Indian River County's plan of high-risk areas, to continue to push and explore, those aren't the real words I used, but to explore ways of addressing that in other areas of the city. Now, please be aware that new developments, all new developments, subdivisions, not just a house, an infill house in the Highlands, certainly, but all new developments have to connect to sewer and water. So we've got that covered.
So one of the things with all the rain that we've had over the last couple of weeks is there certain areas within the city that their septic is getting flooded out?
I'm sure that there is.
That we could address those kind of issues as the emergency issues or whatever, and
There is a study that was performed by Indian River County several years back by Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard, and it identified the high-risk areas in the county. You may be familiar with it. And the Highlands area just south of 510 there, I'm sorry, 512, I apologize, was listed as a high-risk area. And that's due to not necessarily low-lying, but there's so many canals and all, and of course, it's nice sand area. Again, that type of area, in order to run sewer lines through it and connect everybody up would be very expensive. Certainly, it is something that I think this community is very adamant about and would look at, but is that addressing all of the areas that are flooding now? No, I would not know where to begin to say that
Sure.
that is.
Okay,
I apologize.
thank you.
Hi, this is Ruth. I wanted to make a couple of comments. I agree that the comprehensive plan was quite well written, so congrats to all those involved in going through that. I had one little phrase that I guess it's a wording choice. I was on, it's page 29 of the PDF, but it is page 12 of the document on protect air quality. And the first sentence talks about meeting or exceeding federal standards, but you're talking about exceeding in a good way. And a lot of times that same word exceeding can mean you're above what you want it to be. So it's a word choice that I think I know what you want to say there, but when you first read it, you can interpret it to mean that, hey, we're going to be greater than the number that you want us to be less than. You know, you're exceeding it. And one part about the land use and transportation, especially.
Ruth, I'm
Excuse
so
me?
sorry. Ruth, I'm so sorry. I'm on page 12. Could you give me the objective and the policy number?
Oh, you bet. I'm on objective 5-1.5, protect air quality.
Yes.
It's that very first line right after it,
Oh,
that you're ensuring development meets or exceeds. It was just a word choice. And then if you're on policy 5-1.5, 1.5.3, land use and transportation, under that same objective, I wanted to just comment, when you are looking at transportation and mobility elements, some towns I've lived in before have had a truck idling kind of thing. You can't leave truck idling at a store longer than, you know, if you're over a certain size vehicle, it's a diesel emission kind of thing. I was just wondering if, commenting that you could also, in addition to what you have there, which I think is great, you consider working toward idle vehicles and, you know, limiting their idling time or something, just as a suggestion. Those are my comments. Thank you.
What, Ruth, I'm so sorry, but I apologize. I'm not on target as much this evening, I guess, but objective 5-1.5, protect the air quality. What was your suggestive language for the meets or exceeds state and federal air quality standards? Did you have suggested alternative language? Ruth?
Yes, I heard you. I'm
Okay.
thinking I do not have a better word for exceed at this moment. So I
Okay.
think, gosh, I'd look to Kim. She's always been great at that.
Wordsmithing. Well, we'll
How about you maintain tolerance threshold that's regulated by state and federal air quality?
maintains. That is actually probably better. I like it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I apologize for not having a suggestion where I used to hate people who make suggestions, but, you know, didn't give you a replacement for it. So apologies. Did you get my last part under the land use element and transportation and mobility element? So it's the third policy under that objective?
Yes, ma'am. I did capture that. Thank you very much.
Okay. And sorry, again, I don't have specific words, but in general, idle reduction for vehicles. There's plenty examples of towns who have done that before. Looks great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Tom, would you have any questions that you want to add in?
Well, I have some general statements. I guess the first one is you were talking about septic system to sewer conversion. The whole document seems to ignore nitrogen loading of groundwater, which eventually works its way into our local waterways. That's not mentioned at all. There are individual denitrification sanitary systems out there that come as close to a sewage treatment plant as you can on an individual basis. That seems to be, that's not addressed at all in this document.
Could you do me a favor there, Tom? Could you maybe point out a section that could apply to? And, because this is the final draft of what we're looking at, and what you just said is really important, that nitrogen loading. Where in here could we make an effect
Well,
on what
they
you
talk
just
about
said?
5.1.4, 12, 10.13 is the septic to sewer conversion. And that's really, there's not many locations in the document that talks about nitrogen discharge at all. It's like it never happened here. We see evidence of it at Hardy Park, we see evidence of it in all the local waterways, but it doesn't seem to be acknowledged anywhere.
How would you like to see that acknowledged? What would satisfy that?
Well, I think, under a protection of water quality protection, something like that should be mentioned there. There are studies out there that show that nitrogen loading into local waterways, well, that's the reason we have harmful algal blooms, and again, Hardy Park seems to be a good example because you can tell what happens when you have septic interface with local groundwater.
I think on page 28, 29, 28, I'm sorry, page 29, page 30, maybe we could start to address what you just said. If you want to take a moment just to take a look at that. And it goes on over to 31. So 29, 30, and 31, it looks like they're talking about your water quality and water standards, conservation, and soils.
On page 30, under the description of water quality, it does cover the TMDL for nutrients. It doesn't, mention exactly nitrogen loading, but that is covered under that as far as urban runoff and the TMDLs.
Where do you
that are covered.
Where do you see that at, Ms. Hickler?
Page 31.
Page 31.
Kim, does the city have a TMDL?
The waterways have TMDLs. So we have two TMDL mandated waterways, the San Sebastian River, and we have the Inner River Lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
So you're referring to where it says urban runoff is a major contributor of pollutants to the surface waters. Utilization of more advanced treatment techniques and stormwater management will assist in decreasing the detrimental effects of pollution in the natural systems.
Except that we're not talking about urban runoff. We're talking about leaching of nitrogen from septic systems, which leaches directly into groundwater. That's a big difference.
How can we?
I believe, Tom, that we're in the right area.
Right.
But I believe that a little further down, when it talks about the centralized potable water and sanitary sewer systems, and as more septic tanks are connected to central sewer, the opportunity for pollution from septic tanks to enter the lagoon will be eliminated, and that we do go into the BMAPs and the TMDLs. Perhaps in that area, we could make a statement such as recognizing that nitrogen leachate from groundwater is a significant
impact to our local waterways and groundwater.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to say recognizing, what did I say? Nitrogen leachate is a significant, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tom, but I'm trying to write it all down, is a I can't even spell, significant problem, issue, concern? How about a concern?
No, I think it's more than the concern. We know it exists.
Contributor
A contributor, right.
to
A
nutrient
contributing factor.
contamination. Nutrient pollution.
Contributor to water quality issues in the lagoon, is this, yeah?
Into the lagoon and any local surface water.
Okay.
Right? It doesn't have to be a lagoon, it doesn't have to be the Indian River.
Surface water quality.
Well, yeah, contributor to water quality in water bodies, surface water bodies.
I think one of the problems is that we look at sewage treatment plants as the only alternative, and they're not.
What would be another
And, you know,
alternative?
I appreciate what you're saying, and we discussed that as part of, again, going back to the infrastructure element. A lot of these things tied back into each other, and we tried to capture as much without repeating ourselves, but again, the PZ Commission was very adamant about, repeating it several times about the septic to sewer. And we put in there about looking at, I know there's a policy in there about looking at alternative
Right.
septic systems in areas where we can't connect to sewer. The upgraded sewer systems that they have now, I'm sorry, septic systems that they have now. And is that what where you're
Yes.
trying to
Yes.
lead?
That had come up at the workshop, it was in the workshop notes, and it
Yeah.
wasn't added into the section, I remember now, and the discussion is that it was moved to infrastructure.
It's moved to infrastructure, but I couldn't tell
I do
you
remember.
where, because I don't have it in front of me, but I know that that has been captured in there, and I would have to go back and find
Okay.
it. But I'm going to make a note of it and make sure that it is in there, that I'm not dreaming this up, which I don't typically dream while I'm working.
And Lisa, and I know that we were working on this, phrasing that sentence to possibly mention in the description section, or I assume that in page 30 or 32 or whatever. But is it possible to kind of firm up that tone of language underneath the objective 5-1.4, improve water quality and quantity? Can we add some of Tom's suggestions somewhere within that objective?
The answer is yes. I'm just looking.
So maybe under the septic to sewer conversion, after you go through that paragraph, you add, or other alternative methods of reducing.
Well, this would be for, and I'm not trying to speak for Tom, but I think or at least what I interpreted is that we are more conscious that, or a way to try to mitigate known problems, or how we can like quantify a measurement of something. So that to me would be more applicable to your water quality. So some way to measure something, or at least to make it part of some sort of requirement that it's on the forefront, you know, it's been alerted and then we have our attention of it.
I'm sorry, about the nitrogen then? Is that what you're referring back to?
Yes, and again, I'm not trying to speak for Tom, but I think I would think that would be kind of applicable to our water quality, but I could be completely off base.
I'm just trying to figure out where I could put it. But it's duly noted, and you know what, everyone, if you go to policy 5-1.4.13, it does go right back to the policy in the infrastructure element that I believe it is noted, or at least around that area. So, but I will check that out and make sure that it is included.
Tom, do you have any additional comment on that?
No, I think that's fine.
Does anybody else have any additional comment on just what we had just spoken about for the nitrogen load level? Okay, then we'll move on to Donna. Donna, would you like to comment on the?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Jeffrey?
Jeff.
Jeff? Would you like to comment, sir?
Just an observation, for what it's worth, a comparison as you're discussing the septic to sewer conversion. Most of the work I've done over the last 50 years has been in the Florida Keys. In 1999, it was mandated a shift from septic to sewer, and it's only been within the last couple of years that that's been completed. A massive undertaking, probably much more problematic than we'd see locally, simply because the Keys are Pleistocene coral reef, so trying to trench through this and everything. And of course, the expense to homeowners was significant. Also, the deep water discharge was a bit of a problem. It had to get far enough offshore. Probably a different kind of an issue here, since we have aquifer, and in the Keys we don't. All water is piped in from Miami well fields. The issue is the time frame. And I think Donna mentioned that, just in passing, that maybe we're looking a decade down the road. Well, the Keys, by comparison, worked over 20 years to pull this off. I know we have engineers involved and have discussed this. While the sewer system was put in, several new technologies emerged for septic systems that handled nitrogen load better than existing systems. People who've lived in the Keys for 20 to 30 years are now reporting seeing the bottom of their canals for the first time in 3 decades. Water quality has improved. Brian LaPointe, who works at Harbor Branch, has been working in the Keys for the last 50 years. And so there's been a significant uptick in water quality. And it would be nice to encourage that, but I don't think it's possible to get too early a jump start on it, since the time frame we're talking about is probably very significant to pull this off. The fact that new developments are requiring sewer is certainly a step in the right direction. New commercial developments such as the airport and things like that are steps in the right direction. But if we're going to look at this, it's something that probably shouldn't be delayed too very long, since the time frame for implementation is going to be pretty significant. That shouldn't stall us off, but
it's quite a comprehensive plan. Does anybody else up here on the board have any comments on anything we spoke about so far? I want to comment on one thing, but I'd like to ask the rest of the board on Zoom. We'll start with Nikki. Do you have any comments, Ms. Musblatt?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Charles.
Yes, ma'am.
I just had 2. I think the other comments are all spot on, and I appreciate everyone's input, and particularly those who put it together, so thank you. It is very complete. I had 2 questions. I'm actually going to go backwards, so I'm starting towards the end. I'm on page 17 of the document, Objective 5-2.2, the maintenance of the floodplain. And this may be under infrastructure, Ms. Fraser, so maybe this is not the right place to put it. I think one of my concerns was looking at the 100-year floodplain and thinking about this as a long-term document. Or is there a place where they're including an update to the 100-year floodplain in terms of where that will be as conditions may change over the next decade? As well as Part A there under the policy 5-2.2.1. Part A talks about new development encroaching into the floodplain shall incorporate flood protection measures. Just reading through that, the concern that we would allow new development into part of this floodplain and how much development, I think that was just my concern there. And again, I don't know if that goes here or in infrastructure. Maybe you could advise me on that one.
Okay, I'll take your first question first as best as I can. Actually, FEMA just updated a lot of their floodplain maps. You're getting a high five from Kim there. And so they do this periodically. Kim, do you know how often that they redo the floodplain maps? I mean, they just did this.
Well, they redid these maps. They were actually redone in 2017 that we're using. In 2017, the current maps for most of the city were developed. There's an area in dispute that's in the southwest corner, and that is going by a different map, but it's supposed to be like every 10 years, they're supposed to redo them, but there's a huge area in dispute, so that's kind of backed it up for our area.
And then talking about, not allowing individuals to build in the 100-year floodplain, you have to be careful because there are property rights. And as long as you put in, what do I want to say, controls, such as cup-for-cup compensatory storage, which I don't believe we had before.
Sorry.
Okay. I do not believe we had before, and again, we added that, I'm almost pretty certain, into the infrastructure element. If it's not in here, it should be in here. Yeah, there it is. There you go. Such programs may include compensatory storage for loss of floodplain or modifications to construction setback requirements or other site design techniques, as well as upgraded building and construction techniques. So we've added that we need to look at those things. One of the, it's scaring my staff, we have completely upgraded this comprehensive plan, and I'm glad that you all like it so much because we think that it's just really great for the community. We feel it's really answering a lot of the concerns of the community. Unfortunately, this is just the first step because now staff has to go back and revise a lot of our land development codes. But we're up to the task, and I think it'll be great. But one of the things that we'll have to come up with is addressing, floodplain standards and coastal resiliency methods in there. So, Nikki, am I addressing some of your questions?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I just had one other question, and again, this may be something for the landscape ordinances, but if you go back up to page 6 of the document or page 23 of the whole PDF, I'm not sure exactly where you're at, but it is policy 5-1.1.15. And I guess the one after, so 15 and then 16 down below. I think the only thing that I would have wanted to see in that one is, I know that, for the certificate of occupancy, it's required that you don't have any nuisance or invasive exotic vegetation. I just wish we could have something in here that allows us to notify homeowners of nuisance or invasive exotics, as they are continuing to live in a home, and to encourage removal there.
And again, I appreciate this community's desire to really make it such a healthy, livable environment. I mean, it's one of my passions too, but we have to be very careful again of stepping on people's private property rights and, creating a great deal of enforcement that the city cannot, maintain, if you understand what I'm saying. So education is always the best tool, and certainly encouraging natives and making natives part of a new landscape plan, it's already in our landscape code to have 50% natives. Am I correct, Kim?
That's in commercial.
I think it's in residential too, is it not? I'm in new subdivision,
subdivision.
Yes.
It's not anything
Not in an infill single
correct.
home going in.
Correct.
No, but in our subdivisions, in our new developments, commercial developments, it's required that you have over 50% native. If you want to encourage and educate the individual homeowners in the city regarding non-natives, and especially those that are so invasive, I think we have programs like that. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kim.
but we have some brochures that we hand out, but also as whenever I do a tree removal permit or anything like that for someone, I'll go and write on it, okay, approved for removal of dead pine tree. Also, recommend removal and approved removal of, and I'll list their non-natives, and I'll put them on their map for them. So the permit I leave them shows them where their problematic plants are, and they've already approved them for removal of it. I like to think it helps them remove some things, or at least brings their awareness that these things are going to be problems. So, I mean, that's a little part I do, but.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. I think that is at least one step. And I see there under the policy 5-1.1.16, you have the public awareness point, and that is important. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Does anybody else have any comment on what Nikki just brought up?
Kim, does the city keep track of, on the FEMA repetitive loss properties?
Yeah,
They do.
required by law.
And are there any enhanced regulations for those properties?
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
We just lowered our CRS rating by 1 point. Go ahead. It was great news.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Any additional comments? We'll
Hey, this is
move to Ruth.
Jessica.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jessica,
No,
if you're
I
ready.
think you were going in order. Are you sure?
Yes, ma'am, go right ahead.
I do have a few, so I don't want to take up everybody else's time.
You're not taking up anybody's time. We're all here in this together. We've heard that a million times. And
All right.
it's going to be somebody's turn.
I like it.
So go right ahead.
Okay, thanks. And I definitely appreciate this time dedicated for the board to review and to discuss the comp plan, so thank you for that. And having the opportunity myself to be able to provide some recommendations. And as I went through, I was really excited to see Sustainable Sebastian and mentioning of our integrated pest management, open spaces. I mean, there was a lot of improvement just from the draft back in February, March. So definitely excited about that. I did kind of compare some of the previous versions to this document and just would like to make some recommendations, really starting on page 2. Restricted development activities that would damage or destroy coastal and conservation resources was removed as a highlight. I think it would be important to insert that we're restricting development activities that would damage or destroy coastal or conservation resources. That was removed from that section.
I'm sorry,
Under the Objective 5, I'm sorry.
Jessica, it is on. Jessica?
Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me? Ma'am?
I can.
Hello?
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear a response from you, I'm so sorry. Could you please tell me, not the page number, but the objective or policy? And please try to remember that if you're going back to the existing comprehensive plan and trying to compare it apples to apples with this one, it's going to be very difficult, because a lot of what was in the existing was moved into different areas. It may not be on page 1. It may be referenced in a different element. So if you want to...
And I could...
Go ahead.
And I definitely could have missed it, but yeah, I'll state, so it's page 2 under the element highlights. The wording specifically restrict development activities that would damage or destroy coastal and conservation resources was removed. We do mention in that, like not to overpopulate an area, something like that, but it's not a really firm voice or tone saying that we're going to restrict development activities that would actually damage, because this is the whole point of this section, right? Is that we preserve that. So I would recommend that we insert something, if not that specific language, but something similar and a little bit more aggressive in that tone that we're trying to limit the damage to the coastal and conservation resources.
Is that not the same as what's in number 11?
So from my stance, I would like to see restricted development activities. I would like to see something a little bit more blunt and firm. Again, I mean, I know that we highlighted some other areas about not to overpopulate areas and protect our natural resources, but I think having that language specifically really sets a tone for me, at least. Just a recommendation. On page 3, 5-1.1.3, endangered or threatened species section, the listed species, could we add some sort of time frequency to updating that list? I know that doesn't change that often. I did look at the list in this plan, and it did kind of give that disclaimer that it's not all inclusive. But I think it would be important to try to define that, since this is a 20-year plan, as well as trying to define some type of time frequency on, under the same section, it's 5-1.1.8, the native habitats, the inventory and assessment. Because we're saying that we're going to update the list or the inventory, but we don't, what does update mean? Is that every 20 years then? Like, it would be nice to kind of define a time frequency for those.
Let me try to explain a couple things. So the data and analysis is captured at this point in time in order to support the policies and objectives, well, goals, objectives, and policies, the GOPS. So when this goes up to be adopted and reviewed by the state and our stakeholders, they certainly look at the data that's captured today, but that's not what's really being adopted. What's being adopted are the goals, objectives, and policies, right? So to update for the listed species, I don't believe that it really requires a timeline, because that's out of our purview anyway. What it states is that we're going to coordinate with them for the protection of these species, right? And so if that list changes or not, we're still going to coordinate for the protection of these species, correct? You understand what I'm saying? So now, if you go to the native habitat inventory, that may be something that we could put a timeline on. You understand? That's what I'm thinking, Jessica. Kim, do you have some input on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to some of these, we don't have our own policies on them. We are just coordinating and implementing the policies that the state or federal government have decided, and we follow their habitat management plans for the species. So it's not really our time frame, it's theirs.
What I would I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it just says the city will update its inventory. So if we say that we're going to update something, because it could be, as you stated, Lisa, that this is a timeline and we're capturing it today, that's going to be different in 2 years, 5 years, and then when we look at 20 years.
So maybe every 5, 10 years? Something like that? Okay, well, it's duly noted.
Okay, and then the open spaces, that's awesome that we have it mentioned. On the 5-1.1.10 open space, letter B, we are defining now that or mentioning that to be limited to a certain percentage of the stormwater retention area for that open space. I would recommend that we actually define a percentage or some way to really make it that instead of having more stormwater, we're going to have more land. and try to define a firmer perimeter that, hey, this is what we expect moving forward with new developments.
And again, just for edification, the LDC is the appropriate place for that definition, and our LDC already defines that open water bodies, whatever, is a certain percentage of open space. And I can't quote that for you, but it's already in the LDC. But that is the appropriate place to put that percentage, and that's why it states that it shall include that.
So is that percentage, kind of future looking, or is that percentage yesterday or previous stance, if that makes sense? Have we increased the percentage?
No, it's been the same for a long time, and I don't think we're looking to increase it. What it is trying to do is to, and I kind of like it, because we are now requiring, it already was required, but it wasn't quite identified as being required, that we have littoral, that our stormwater ponds actually should contain littoral shelves, right? And because of our newly revised stormwater fee credits, you can get a credit for it, even though it's required. You can get to do additional littoral shelf, and you can get a credit for it on your stormwater fee credit. And this is only in commercial; it's not in residential. However, in residential subdivisions, it's required you have a littoral shelf, and so a portion of that stormwater pond or that lake area can be recognized as open space, because we all know that it's part of the natural ecosystem and habitat that is occurring within those subdivisions. And so that is why that's in there, but we already have that addressed in the LDC. When the time comes for the updating of a lot of these ordinances, I'm sure that you all, may be involved, or at least Kim will keep you apprised of what's going before the PZ.
Yeah, I get that it's credit. It's unfortunate that we do lose some of that land for the wildlife to be there. So it would be nice, thinking this is a 20-year plan, because that's what you see in most developments, a lot of water areas, instead of having the trees and the grass and those native areas that really promote the wildlife. So that's why I was excited to see some of the open spaces mentioning here and the corridors that we're mentioning to build up those areas to promote that wildlife. And these comments too, because I have a couple other ones that, we set a percentage. I think this is an opportunity to increase that, because again, this is a 20-year plan. So a lot's going to change in 20 years, and if we can have this as that sounding board to be able to, increase some of those areas or, percentages or whatever it may be, that would be awesome. But I know that we're limited to some of the things that we can do. So moving on to policy, it's on page 5, policy, 5-1.1.13. The preservation of native vegetative communities. This is one of the minimum of 25%. This is that opportunity that we have to try to increase. I would definitely recommend that we somehow redefine that percentage, especially when we look at lots. By the time you have the house and the pool and the 3-car garage and everything else, you really don't have any sort of native trees or anything like that. If there is a way to be able to really define that and to try to increase, I don't know how that would look or how that would be possible, but it would be nice to, have maybe it's a separate category based on the house and the square footage or that footprint versus, because that 25% is going to look different for each lot, right? So being able to maybe categorize it somehow, or how we can increase it
This is not,
to get more natives.
this is not a 25% of open space. This is a minimum of 25% of each native vegetative community, including trees. So what this is saying is that
Right.
if you have a lot with scrub oak only, native scrub remaining, then, there's this enticement to set aside 25% of that scrub area as part of your native landscape. And then we go on to say that if you can't, we're looking at, people setting up a tree bank. This was Robert's idea, which hasn't been set up yet. This is something that would have to come later, or by revegetation of that same type of habitat. So we're trying to maintain the habitat corridors as they exist today. So this isn't, that 25% is about the native vegetation on that particular site. It's not necessarily about 25% of open space. Does that make sense?
No, and I understand that. I was asking for an increase in the 25%.
Oh.
How
I
can we
hear
get that increase?
You need to simplify things for me.
We need more native stuff. Because it really, for me, and maybe I misunderstand too, the tree ordinance, but to my understanding, if, and maybe this isn't in that same section, but it kind of has segued my thought process. You have to have a certain amount of trees on your lot. If you don't, then you get fined. Is that correct?
No, you don't get to move in your house.
So there is a restriction to your CO if you do not have the certain percentage of tree or the ratio or however it's defined, you actually restrict the CO?
Right, you have to meet the tree ordinance, residential tree ordinance requirements in order to receive your CO.
Okay.
Kim, is
So
that written on the
you're
certificate of
fined
occupancy?
as well as the CO is restricted?
I'm sorry?
So you're fined and the CO is restricted?
There's no fine. They can't move into their house. So they don't really wait for a fine. They just fix it so they can move in their house.
Okay.
So this
Thank you
is
for
supposed to
clarifying.
be, we don't want to be too onerous and stepping on, again, people's personal property rights. You may be somebody who really likes your native trees, but there's other individuals who do not. So we can only do what we can only do, all right? So what this is trying to support is that tree preservation code that says, we want you to try to at least save 25% of your native canopy, as part of your tree preservation. Because some people go in and they just clear the whole lots and they don't care. They'll just replace it with the, new orange trees. So this is something that is trying to, again, support what we have in place and really encourage people to preserve their native species. And I would not recommend that you increase it from 25%. You have no idea how much backlash Kim gets every day.
Can we at least try to make that 25% continuous?
Continuous? I'm not.
Yeah, well, because what I'm noticing is that some of these little subdivisions that go in, they're saying they're saving trees, but it's one tree here, one tree there.
In clumps, yes.
Yeah, I like the whole place.
And that's going to take an upgrade for the landscape code, and that is first on Robert and Kim's tickler as soon as this gets done, because we have been talking about it far too long, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Clustering of trees.
Is that something we could comment on tonight to get it in for what we're talking about?
Well, that's not necessarily appropriate here. Again, you do not want to, and the comprehensive plan is not supposed to do that. We're not here for regulations, okay? Regulations of the Land Development Code. That's where that's appropriate. This is just your overriding goals and policies to get you to the regulations which is the Land Development Code. And I also want to point out that, you know, we cannot make, this is not the time to make big major changes to this element tonight. I mean, we're far down the road. So to make big, huge material changes, I can bring them to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I mean, we are really far down the road here. So, you know, there's been opportune time to be reviewing this and giving us comments all along. And so I'm definitely these considerations that we can add you know, support things a little more, make them a little, you know, more, what do I want to say, broader. We can do that, but to make huge material changes at this point, it's, again, I'll be happy to bring it to P&Z, but this isn't the time.
Does anybody want to comment on any of that?
I think the key thing to remember is that this is a guideline. The real work comes when you adopt the code to match the guidelines that are in this plan. So the plan is meant to be general, it's meant to set guidelines up, but it's when they go in and change the town code, that, or the city code, that's where the action is.
And I can assure you that this board has already brought up, what, about a year and a half ago, I want to say, if not longer. How long have I been here already? My gosh. So this board, the NRB, is going to be part of the committee, just like you are with the IPM, to help us start addressing our landscape code rewrite. And we already have it, you know, kind of outlined as to how we're going to work. We want to work with volunteers in this board. I know that there's individuals in the community that want it to also be stakeholders' input, just like the IPM plan. We're going to put together the people. We're going to, you know, work with you on being able to include those things in our landscape ordinance when that time comes, which will be in 2021.
Is there any additional comment on that before I say something?
I mean, I'm definitely supportive of, you know, submitting whatever the board recommends. I mean, this is a 20-year plan, even though it is a guideline. And with COVID, it really caused activity in our meetings. So, you know, it was delayed in being able to review this information. But I did have a few other items. Can I continue to cover those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Under the 5-1.2, the protection of surface waters, the previous had wetlands mentioned there. I think it would be important, since we do have some of the policy, that we have that in the title as well as wetlands. And then as far as the 5-1.2.4, establishing the wetland line, what does the first sentence mean?
So what page are you on, Jessica?
Sorry, page 6.
Page 6, well, depends on what you have, yeah.
That's the boundary line.
The first line states.
No non-water dependent uses. What does that mean?
No
non-water.
On submerged land or land.
So if it's a non-water dependent use.
A water-dependent use would be something like a dock, a bulkhead, something that goes in the water to enhances access to navigation.
Correct, but something like a building is, you know, shall, okay. So this should say no non-water.
Are we, because I know some of the previous versions, we had mentioned that there's no development, like we specifically stated, no development in a wetland. So is that what this is stating?
With the exception of a dock or a bulkhead.
We're just clarifying, change the language to clarify that docks and landings, sort of things are allowed when they're permitted.
You can't take a waterfront property owner's right to access the water away.
Right.
Well, I was really looking at development on wetlands, because before we had really had firmer language again that specifically stated that we're not going to have development in wetlands. And maybe I missed it in this, and that first sentence kind of hits on that. So I don't know if we can, get firmer on that language to say that it's no development. And again, maybe I've missed it because you all are a lot more familiar with this than me.
Again, I don't believe that we are allowed to state that you cannot develop in a wetland without allowing permitting options and mitigation options. And I'm not sure if our past one, I would have to look it up to see if it actually stated that, but I don't believe it stated that you are prohibited from developing in wetlands, because that plan's been in place since 1999, and we certainly have been developing, haven't we? So.
And those permits are issued by the state, we don't
That's
override
right.
them.
And the state is the one who determines what the wetland line is, the Corps does, and they're the ones who determine what the value of that wetland is and what the mitigation is going to be for that, and if you get a permit to develop in that wetland. So I would hesitate to add verbiage in there saying we're not going to allow development in wetlands. However, we are saying that, we're basically saying that no non-water dependent uses shall be permitted on submerged lands or wetlands. We are basically making that statement. But I know that somewhere else, it's saying that, you have to get a permit from St. John's and the Corps in order to do it, so.
5126.
Thank you. I knew there was something in there. But what we've also added is the wetland transition area. And Kim and I are very excited about that because we wanted to make sure that wetland buffers were recognized and held in check in new developments around wetlands. So we're excited about that. Basically, we're keeping it to the minimum standards set by the state, but at least we're recognizing that that is something important here in this community.
Can I comment on that? I'm going to just jump in just real quick because I know we're moving along. Instead of using minimum standards when it comes to wetlands and such like that, why can't we use maximum standards? Because what happens...
That's the language that is used.
I've been in the...
What's the maximum? See, you can't...
I don't know, they're probably a little bit tougher
maximum
than the
buffer
minimum,
for a
though.
wetland, it is all dependent upon the wetland and what kind of species you're trying to preserve.
I know,
So
but
a maximum
there's always
buffer could be
loopholes.
500 feet. We're not going to keep people to a maximum buffer of 500 feet, whereas the minimum standard for St. John's permitting is 15.
15 feet?
Correct.
Well, 500 feet sounds a lot better than 15.
Not if you have a lot that's only 140 feet long.
Now, the lots along the San Sebastian River, they have a 50-foot.
Right, well, that's a different
that's
waterway.
set by
And
an
these are
ordinance,
set
so-
by St. John's. So
Right.
St. John's is the one who sets these standards.
Well,
And that's why
I'm saying more of a maximum effort instead of a minimum effort and then break it down from there.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Or the highest possible.
Yeah, highest and best possible use.
Again, we could say 100 feet, but the state determines that, not us. They delineate it, and they decide the buffer zone based on the water body. And so if they say 20 feet's needed, we don't get to require 100 over that.
So we don't really have any say about that, where that littoral line, those rights start and end, because the state sets up all that. So if I want to use maximum and say 500 feet, and the state goes, no, it's 25 feet, or it's 15 feet, whatever the state says, oh, I gotcha.
You can't overrule the state under home rule?
No.
Mm.
We don't overrule the
You
federal government.
can,
Because I
But
know
you're
in New
opening
York, we
yourself
overrode the
up.
state all the time under home rule because our restrictions were greater than theirs.
correct. And we can, I'm sure, but I would want to get a legal opinion on what we actually say in here, and our attorney is looking at it, obviously, but we open ourselves up. And there are other municipalities and counties that have opened themselves up to litigation by overstepping their requirements. Let me just put it that way. So I would like to stay very close to whatever the state requires for these particular areas. I think it would be wise. That's my recommendation.
Well, it certainly is easier, right? And
It's
legally,
wiser.
it's easier. I meant legally, it's easier.
And legally, yes, thank you, yes.
So when this transition area for the standard then that's set, is that where it's defined what can and cannot be built or put in that transition area? Does that make sense?
Yes, so when you develop a
reason why I'm
piece of
asking-
property and you set your wetland boundary, and I've done this for so many years, you set your wetland boundary and then you establish the transition area or the buffer area, and typically you do not develop, you cannot develop in the buffer area. The buffer area becomes part of your protected area, and they give you credits for that, for the uplands that you protect or the plantings that you provide. So that's part of your protected area. And so no, you don't develop in it. Now, you could do boardwalks or a dock or something like that over the buffer area, certainly, but nothing impervious, no big structures.
Like on the San Sebastian River, it's 1/4 the width of your lot. You can have a passage cleared to go to a dock, but that's it, in a buffer zone.
That's a lot. I should limit it to 6 feet.
They're pretty narrow lots, though.
Yeah,
They
I
really
should
are.
limit it to 6 feet.
Yeah, they're deep but narrow.
And one of the sections that was removed too, or maybe it was mentioned, and just recalling from memory, was the stormwater management plan. I think that was under this wetlands and surface water section. Is that?
It has been moved
And maybe
to
I was
infrastructure.
It's been moved.
Stormwater management plans and all things stormwater regulations, not all things, but, for the building of them and the development of them, the permitting of them, has all been moved to infrastructure.
And is that in this coastal and conservation section or chapter, I guess this would be?
No,
called?
ma'am, that would be in the infrastructure element. There are 8 elements.
Elements. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So there's 8 elements. There's actually 9, but we did not look at the economic development element during this update.
Awesome, thank you. And just 2 more things. The fisheries, from before we had mentioned, the promotion, the propagation of fish and wildlife, as well as managing the impacts of development on fisheries. Is that something that maybe was added to a different section?
It would be under the protection of marine resources, would it not? I don't see fisheries, but
I
I
didn't see anything.
can't
Yeah, I didn't see
imagine.
anything about fisheries, but again, could have missed it.
Well, I'm going to have to look that up because, we wouldn't necessarily remove it. I can't imagine.
Well, there is a wording, it says estuarine areas such as living marine organisms. Would fisheries fall under that?
The estuarine, yes. Estuarine is our lagoon, and that's the nursery for all our fish. So we must have just kind of clumped it all in there as far as that. Because, of course, as you point out, if you're protecting your estuarine water quality and your coastal marshes and, your seagrass beds, you're protecting your fish.
Well,
I would think.
realistically, the city would have nothing to do with regulating finfish or shellfish. That's all left up to the state.
Exactly. That's in your Class 2 waters, which we are recognizing Class 2 waters and your shellfish harvesting and all of that good stuff, so.
So someone's monitoring it somewhere, somehow.
At the state level. A lot of things that, were included in the past comp plan was really a lot of, there was many things that were redundant or beyond the city's purview, if you will. Or, we only can, the state preempts a lot of things from us, so we have to just defer to the state. Or federal
Thank you.
government.
And one remaining item, there was a hazardous waste section. Has that been moved to a different element? I'm sorry. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. It's illicit discharge. We just changed the terminology to be in line with the state, National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System language, like regulatory. So it's the same. It's just referring to it as an illicit discharge. Where's that? It's in water quality.
I recall that being mentioning. I didn't know if that's what that meant, though. So thank you for clarifying and for explaining some of the sections for me. I appreciate having the opportunity to ask questions and get some feedback. So thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for your input, Jessica. Ruth, would you like to step in and contribute? Or did you already?
I have already made comments that I intended to. Thanks.
Okay. Donna, we already asked if you wanted to. Mr. Jeff, did you want to comment on anything? Okay. The only thing that I have is under objective 5.2.4 on page 18, it says policy 5241, post-hurricane assessments. Are we able to change that to post-disaster assessments with reflection to the COVID disaster that we're dealing with right now? So that it's not just hurricane and that it's reflective of all disasters. And then it also says the city council shall appoint a recovery task force. And I'd like to know, does anybody know if that recovery task force has been appointed, who it's compromised of, and who makes the determinations?
States right in there, sir, that the recovery task force is comprised of the city manager, the building official, and others as determined by the city council. This is in compliance with our emergency management plan. I do hear what you're stating about the post-hurricane assessments. I don't know if disaster is the correct term, but I do hear what you're saying, and I'm not sure if we're going to make, if the appropriate language is to change it here or to add something else, because I thought that we had emergency management. We had talked about, here we go, 5-2.3 emergency management. And we're talking about the pandemic and everything. And then we have hurricane evacuation, hazard mitigation plan. So you're right, it may be more of a post-emergency assessment. I think that's the terminology. I like that. Do you agree?
The title post-disaster redevelopment for that objective, the D in disaster is not capitalized, but I would agree too that.
Oh, very good, thank you.
Replace hurricane with disaster.
Post-emergency assessments, I like that. And I'm sorry, and you're also stating that have a post-emergency redevelopment. I like that. Okay.
Okay, and then there was there's a public facilities review committee as well as the recovery task force. And I didn't know if there was a time frame for those people to be put in after we reopened. Is that recovery task force, when do they start to go into play? There's just really no wording there. It's mostly in relation to if everything's blown down, but this is a different type of disaster, which I feel has actually been worse than other hurricanes I've had to deal with.
What you're referring to, all of these things should be or will be included in the city's management plan. We have an emergency management plan that we maintain, and some of this verbiage came from that. And so if it's not in there, it would be updated to be in there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I mean, as long as it gets updated.
Every year, we add things to it.
Because I think that local peacetime emergency plan that they're referring to in letter F, recommending amendments to the local peacetime emergency plan, is actually the plan that we're underneath right now. And that is really old. I mean, it refers to wartime actions. And, you know, I would think that could definitely be updated while we're doing all this. I don't really have any other comment other than trying to change the verbiage in it and the timelines. Like, I'd like to see when this recovery task force is supposed to go in play. Does it go into play the day after we open?
It's within 90 days after appointment, the task force shall meet to determine. So
within 90
positive,
days after the appointment.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that it's within the City of Sebastian's emergency management plan.
I just haven't seen anything on it, and
but I'll verify that.
We haven't been asked to participate.
Why would we?
I don't know. Just in general, in public, if the city council, it basically says the city council is going to be determined and others as determined by the city council is going to participate on this task force. That was one of the questions I had: is who are the as othered? How are they determined? They could be anybody. That's why I said nobody's been asked to participate. And
in the current
anything. And it's just really hard out there. And I like to get this moving on. The other thing I just would like to, I don't think I'm going to be able to do anything about it, but I'm just saying this because this is what we do. On page 4, under objective 5.1.1 under C, it says, it's for the protection of natural resources, wildlife habitats, and city land development code, or the LDC shall include. And under C, it says provisions which recognize the rights of property owners to use their lands in a manner consistent with rules, policies, and guidelines. Can we also do provisions which recognize everybody else other than the property owners who live there? Because it seems like if it's just provisions that recognize just the property owners to use their lands in a manner consistent with rules, that if they find something, their mitigation is to mitigate it so far away it's not within our zone. I'm not saying that we can actually do something about that, but I would like it to recognize the rights of all people, that the land is used in a manner consistent, that you're not going to wipe everything out, or you're going to do it under the rules and guidelines of the St. Johns River Management. And then just above that, it says, let me see, that you're able to get a permit. I'm sorry, it's just below that on policy 5.1.1.2, wildlife protection. The city shall utilize the LDC in review process to ensure development projects evaluate potential environmental impacts. Development shall not adversely impact any threatened or endangered species without special concern or appropriate permitting or mitigation. Are we able to say that if that development affects the threatened species, 1, you're not going to get the permit, or 2, the mitigation has to take place within the area that you're adversely affecting?
Again, if we are talking about adverse impacts to threatened or endangered species, I mean, a lot of that is state run and state permits. Okay, we do obviously, take care of, or at least try to take care of, because we have a resolution regarding it, our gopher tortoise. But, scrub jays here, are pretty well delineated, and we're working very closely with the county parks to make sure that their flyways and byways and their whatever's remains. And, we know where the eagles are. I'm just not going to open this up.
Yeah.
This is state and federal laws that we follow. And, we can definitely have guidelines regarding like gopher tortoise and things like that, but.
Are we able to put something in there for when they do have to do the permitting to adversely affect this area? Because it adversely affects it forever. Bam. That mitigation for that adverse effect also takes place in the area that it's adversely affected.
Well, you don't know where their mitigation could occur. I mean, I'll give you the example of gopher tortoise again. Somebody has 5 gopher tortoise on their property, and they've got to move them, right? You can no longer take gopher tortoise. You can't bury them in the ground. So you have to move them, but you have to move them to state-sanctioned sanctuaries that are at least 25 acres or more, and that they have capacity to add 5 more gopher tortoise. They're not here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they don't have capacity, then you don't get your permit.
Well, that's true, but it's not going to be, in Sebastian. So if you're trying to portray that, these gopher tortoise have to stay here,
or the
we can't do
mitigation
that.
takes place within our area. Because what's happening right now is that a developer will come in for a small subdivision, and then he's got areas that needs to be mitigated. And what they're doing is that they're purchasing rights or credits in another area.
Yep.
I'm correct about that then.
Yep.
And that really stinks, because what happens is that our area ends up being plowed under. The area that they're giving the credits in is in wide open country anyhow, that I've been out there and it's Gatorland.
I hear
nobody's
you.
going to be building into marshland anyhow.
But these mitigation banks for gopher tortoise or wetlands or you name it, they're established and permitted by the state. And so if there isn't any other logical place to do it locally, then you just can't.
Deny the
It is incentivized through
permit.
cost, because now, if you have a big piece of property, you could pay to remove those 5 tortoises, but if you qualify for an on-site relocation where you have enough habitat that you can actually move it
That's
to
the
another
key
area of your
word,
property.
enough habitat.
Right, you have adequate forage and habitat for them, you can do an on-site relocation, which is like a tenth the cost.
Yeah, but then you have.
That does answer my question.
That's not entirely the true story, but yes, it could work
Well,
if you have enough.
that's mitigation within that area. That's exactly what I'd
Well,
like
I
to see.
believe that the state also added some language just recently that local governments, you can do some mitigation through local governments as far as, some kind of, let's say you have to destroy a 1-acre wetland. Then you can work with the local government to do some water quality improvements. I think that language made it in the legislation. I'm not sure if it's being challenged. I know I did it 20 years ago when I was permitting and mitigating, but I'm not sure if that's there today. I hear what you're saying, Charles.
Because they're
but
making
you
money
can't-
off this now. I don't know if you guys know.
You cannot say it has to be, everything has to be locally, because we're not that big of a city.
Well, that's it. I don't want to see.
Wetland mitigation banking has been around since the 80s. So the no net loss policies. So, I mean, that's something that was, helpful in saving some wetlands. I mean,
It's starting to get real busy now, because I'm starting to see it being applied in different closing situations and things like that. But what I don't want to see, because I'm starting to get older too. I remember this place when I was 15, 10, 8, and it was a completely different place. It wasn't completely mowed under, General Development had already been here, so they had already compromised the area. But now it's getting so built out where they're building, everything's getting built up, and their mitigation process is to buy credits way out west. And it does, I guess, save those wetlands, but those wetlands are in the middle of a lake. They're not going to be affected for generations. and they're just making money off it, but I didn't know if there was something that we could do that would say the mitigation has to take place in our area, and it may be state regulated as well. Yep, I see it is. But I'm trying to save our area here because
Well, the problem here is that you have mostly single and separate lots. So there's nothing you can do about it.
They're all
Those
owned.
lots were created back when general
They're
development
all
created
owned,
them.
platted, and zoned, so they can't.
Okay. Other than the disaster preparedness and that's all I have to input for that. Is there any additional input that anybody wants to put in for anything we've spoken about so far? We're still working on the final draft of the conservation and coastal management element, item B under new business.
So let me just wrap up. Oh, I'm sorry, unless there's public comment. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt,
right.
Charles. I apologize.
Your public comment too, you know. Any public comment on Zoom or online?
There is no one.
And does staff have any other additional comments?
Just going to wrap up and let you know what our steps are now. Okay, so you all know. We're going to, I'm going to take all of these comments and, well, with the help of Janet, be able to hopefully summarize them and bring them in front of the Planning and Zoning Board, the Land Planning Agency, which is the recommending body for the comprehensive plan. Okay, and they are meeting October 15th in order to look at the entire final draft. Okay, but we will bring some of all of these proposed changes, updates, clarifications to them for their consideration including in this element, okay? At that point, on the 15th, should the LPA feel confident that we are in a good place and they want to recommend the updated Comprehensive Plan 2040 to the City Council, we will then be bringing it to City Council. I do not know yet when that will be. We are under consideration of doing a workshop or two with the City Council in November, December. We had a timeline with the State Department that went sideways due to COVID because we couldn't have public participation meetings. So we're a little behind schedule, though there's no penalty or anything for that. They're just waiting. So when the City Council determines how they would like to proceed, either with one workshop and then a public hearing, we'll certainly let everyone know that. But once the City Council does a public hearing, they will adopt the proposed comp plan. And when that happens, then we send it out to all of our stakeholders as well as the state. They have 30 days to provide us with any kind of input or changes or things that may be necessary for us to do, and they return it to the city. The city then actually has 180 days, hopefully it won't take us that long, to make those changes and to sew it all up into a nice package and bring it back to the City Council for their final adoption hearing. Okay, so there's several hearings that will be taking place in the very near future. Once the City Council does do the final adoption, once again, there's like it's 30, I think it's 21 days, something like that, for anyone to challenge it. And hopefully at that point, everyone has already been heard and there wouldn't be a challenge. And then it's formally adopted, and then we're ready to go. So that is the schedule. If you look on our website, I have attempted to show that timeline in the comprehensive plan area, showing all of the meetings that we've already conducted and the ones to come. So with proposed dates, but these dates are not necessarily set in stone. It'll be up to the City Council to determine that, and hopefully I'll be able to get those dates at our next council meeting. That is my desire. So, again, I really thank everyone for their input, for their time reading this. I mean, we did a lot of heavy lifting back in, was it in February that we all met and had the workshop? And then everything stopped. The world stopped. So I thank you again for taking another look. I know Kim has worked incredibly hard on making sure that all of your notes were incorporated into this version. So again, thank you very much.
We'd like to thank the staff, for Sebastian's staff as well. I know Robert's been over there a little quiet, but he's in the mix of all this as well. Ms. Hagler, Ms. Frazier, you guys have been, every time I come into the office, you guys are just working on something that has to do with this, and I'd like to show my appreciation, or say my appreciation as well. And hopefully it's shared by the rest of the board. Okay, any additional comment on the final draft conservation coastal management element? I know I already asked for public input, but any additional comment? We're going to move on. Okay, item number 8, old business. We'll start down at the end with Mr. Powers. No?
Nothing here.
Oh, well, I'm just going down the list. Any old business?
There's nothing there, you can skip that one.
All right, no old business. Number 9, member matters. I guess we'll start again down there.
I'm good.
Tom?
I've got nothing.
Anything?
Yes, I just wanted to mention the fact that this weekend, the Sebastian River Art Club is having the Pelican Island Conservation Art Show right here in the Art Center. And I had talked to Kim, maybe if the board wanted to maybe have a table on Saturday that would have information about sustainable Sebastian. It might be a good opportunity. The time of the show on Saturday is from 10 till 5. I would suggest that, you would pick, maybe an hour or two to man a table. I wouldn't be there all day long, but I just thought it might be an opportunity with the artists that are in the show are not just from Sebastian. We'll have other people from Vero and wherever that support the Pelican Island Preservation Society that will be involved here, but I just thought maybe you might be interested in
I would be
getting the
happy to
education.
provide material. I cannot be there on Saturday, but I will set up a table in that room on Friday before I leave and put a tablecloth and put out the materials if anybody would like to man it. If not, we'll at least have some materials out.
Okay.
Does anybody know if they can participate right now?
Well, I'll definitely be there, but.
Are you going to be there, Donna? You going to man the table?
I'll be there, but I am part of the art
Oh,
show,
okay.
so
Yeah.
I can't
Have you seen it?
necessarily
It's just
be
beautiful
there
art.
at
That's
the
a
table.
great idea, though.
But the
And let's
Get our word
let's
out.
get it marketed on the city too. Give me some information on it.
Okay, but the other thing, because I mentioned this to you, is that the art club is still planning on being in the park for our shows, and we'll have one every month. So it might be, you would certainly be welcome to have a table there at all of our shows, because I don't think you're going to be doing too many other shows. Because one of the things with our art shows is we don't have a band, we don't have food, we don't have drinks, so it's not going to be, people are relatively safe, safer than if they were drinking and eating and singing. But anyway, I just thought I could put out the dates for all of our shows if we would like to, put out the educational part of what we are all here for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I see, especially with it being inside. I can set it up Friday and put some things out. Take a minute.
Mr. Jeff, anything? Anybody get anything online? Ruth or Nikki?
I would like to thank the city. Kim sent the Shred It Recycle event, and the Callahan household participated. I'm glad we do that.
And I should have brought the
Thanks for
numbers with me. They
passing that
are
along.
amazing. like the numbers, it's like 90,000 pounds of paper. It's ridiculous. I'm going to bring the numbers next time. Because it's insane. You won't believe how much was collected at that event. Everybody's been
My
cleaning out
husband-
during COVID.
My husband really liked watching the shredding machine do its thing. The guy showed how it worked, so we got to watch our paper get shredded. Anyway, it was nice, thanks.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth. Nikki, do you got anything?
Nope, I'm good. We're good.
Thank you very much. The only thing I have is our preparations for Earth Day. The last, I don't know if I've been doing this now 3 years or third or fourth one, but we would have all of our invitations sent out by November. Literally, we'd be working, nothing.
No, we can't determine any of that at this moment, so we'll just have to wait. We didn't get them out last November. We didn't get them out till last
We
January.
were just struggling.
But we had a full roster of participants still. I think everyone's waiting for community events, and as soon as we can know that we can have it, then we'll be on it. I will let you know as I know.
Right, and we do have an art show in April. It's not the end of April, it's the 3rd of April, that we could at least hand out seed packets at.
We should definitely, I mean, I don't know if you saw the last city council meeting, but Mayor Dodd had suggested that that was something that he thinks that Earth Day will be the first big community event of being free to have community events, and he thinks it'll be the biggest yet. So I hope Mayor Dodd is correct, and I will let you know as soon as I know.
That's all I have for member matters. Does anybody else have anything under member matters? We'll move on to item 10, staff matters. Anything? Hey, guys.
No.
Item 11, items for next agenda. Item A, review draft for Sustainable Sebastian Action Plan spreadsheet. Item B, raising awareness of Sustainable Sebastian. Then item C, NRB website edits. Any comments on any of that? Can I have a motion to adjourn our meeting then?
A motion that we adjourn.
Can I have a second motion for adjournment?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Donna. Adjourn this motion of the Natural Resource Board.
Kiss me a few. Oh, those girls don't know what they're missing. I've got a lot of living to do.